this is, as we see of the orange color here, it's the animal kingdom, and this line here describes or marks out the middle of the animal kingdom. And terrestrial mankind is on this journey, on the second half of the animal kingdom. And here we have the border to the true human kingdom, where we all have cosmic consciousness and suffering is over. These figures here symbolize our sexual poles, the structure of a sexual poles, which when we are pure animals, we are one-poled beings. That's what makes us animal. And as we grow towards becoming more humane, and the faculty of neighborly love grows in us, it does so in harmony with the changing and transformation of the poles. So when we reach cosmic consciousness, they are in balance, and we have full ability to love, full ability to neighborly love. But we're not there yet. Martinus describes that terrestrial mankind today we find in these sections here. And maybe only one or two or a few that have come above there. But we are all in this area. And this figure here symbolizes the killing principle. And that means all unnatural shortening of other living beings' lives. And we've done a lot of that, and the karma that follows of these actions. And in relation to stress, one can say that what terrestrial mankind, or we do a lot today, is the meat-eating bit. We are not stressed in the situation where we eat meat. Hopefully we enjoy it. But it's a stress on our organs. Our organs are not, don't really have the capacity to overcome the energy that the meat and the animal beings that come into our body when we eat them. And therefore we stress our digestive system, which becomes tired and perhaps uses energy from other parts of the body. So that is a great stress on our system and on our body. But it also creates stress in the way that due to the anxiety that we with the meat eating cause the animals in the slaughterhouses, they know what's going to happen to them and they feel great anxiety. And that makes us receptive to anxiety due to the law of karma. And also the micro-beings that are in the meat, they are also animal. And when they come into our digestive system, it's a very fearful and awful death they go about them. It's like for us being in nature catastrophes. So we create anxiety for them and are therefore more receptive towards anxiety. So one way of becoming more calm and have less stress in your life is growing out of meat eating. The next figure here symbolizes the thought climates that lie behind the actions of the killing principle. And here we have thought climates: jealousy, envy, competition, greed, robbery, fraud, hatred, revenge, thirst for power, and so on. And these are all deadly poison for our growing neighborly love. And in relation to what we normally call stress, one could, we pass the worst parts of these, where they culminate. And in this area here, one can find irritation and frustration, which is a kind of sort of diluted or held back killing. There's still energy of gravity in it. and in our workplaces where there's lots of competition, that's also something that causes lots of stress and that we can identify as being part of this figure. The next figure here is the kinds of thoughts that lie behind arrogance and ambition. And this is also a large part of society today. We sort of have to be ambitious in order to have our work. If we're not ambitious, we are kicked out and others will take our place. So it can be very difficult to step out of that. And the whole culture that we live in builds on having a career and achieving more, to have more money, to buy a new car and a new house, and having the modern clothes so that you fit into the flock and all that business. And this is very stressful for many people, and they perhaps also know that they're really false values that don't give them nourishment, but it's still it takes a lot of courage to step out of it. And so we are rather caught in these values. And what lies behind this is also this self-worship, where we want to be better, want to be best even, and we do it at the cost of others, and we don't mind that. But the more humane, the more we suffer in these areas, and the more humane we grow, the more difficult it will be to do it at the cost of others. It will give us a bad conscience and be difficult. And the next figure here symbolizes the birth pangs of the true human kingdom that is growing within us. And here we have lots of things, lots of phenomena that are related to stress today. This transformation of the poles are putting us in situations we have never been in before in this spiral cycle. Women are earning money or having responsible positions in their jobs, and maybe they are having their own firm or what have you, and being economically independent maybe for the first incarnation in this spiral cycle. And there are lots of new things they have to work out how to do and how to manage. But women are often well supported when their masculine pole is growing, because the masculine pole is well known in society, and oh, clever girl, or clever woman, when the masculine pole grows. For men who are losing or climbing out of their masculine pole and losing their position maybe, or not being interested in career, and perhaps having to face to be not so strong any longer, and society does not approve of that. So that's rather tricky to be in such a situation, I can imagine, and I've heard from friends. And within this figure, Martinus includes all the sexual derailments that are a possibility during this period of transformation of the poles, with all kinds of awful things like being raped, or being in sadism and masochism, and all kinds of difficult things that we can come into because of lack of knowledge about what is going on. And also he calls this figure the zone of the unhappy marriages. And an unhappy marriage, unhappy love and divorce, all stressful things. So there's plenty to be stressed about. And I'd also like to mention an article, Unnatural Fatigue, that some of you might have read. It exists in English, where Martinus describes what we see a lot of today in today's society. Stress leads to fatigue, we all know that. And there he talks about enormous accelerating development we've gone through the last 100 years. Earlier, we would either obey from us orders from our superiors, or we would be superiors and give orders. And things were sort of structured and the way they were, and you didn't worry much about that. And now we relate to each other in all kinds of new ways, in the workplaces and in the families, where the family structure is being dissolved, more or less. And in all these relationships we have, when people blame us, or when people act badly, we consider them doing wrong things, we blame them. That's the automatic function of the animal part. And this blaming and putting guilt on others, it can be, we do it in order to keep ourselves clean. It's easier to see the faults in the others. You all recognize that. I think I'm probably not the only one who has tried this victim consciousness of martyrdom. It's a very heavy way of being. You sort of sink and become very tired, really very tired. And the reason for that is, of course, that we are going absolutely in the wrong direction. It's as far away from the truth as we can come. Because as we've learned here, we cannot anywhere in our lives come across anything that we are not that we are not ourselves the cause of. So, being in martyrdom or victim consciousness is a deadly poison. And thoughts are a life force, so Martinus said we better watch out what thoughts we carry. And he compares it with, thought comes into physical matter on the level of the electrons. And he says that we could look into what happens with these on the level of the electrons. He says they become destroyed or infertile, he actually uses the word. And he compares it with, on a macro, mesocosmic level, it would be as if the Earth had areas of, desert areas that were growing because of poisonous gases coming in somewhere from, or from the other world, and spiritual world. And our bodies can take this if it's only for shorter periods, because our bodies have a great excess of life force and life energy. But eventually, if it goes on, it can go on for years and years, decades, people can be stuck in this kind of mental prison. And eventually it makes us mentally ill or physically ill, or we can even commit suicide. And I'd like to give you a little example from my own life, which is perhaps not as drastic as this, but this of giving the blame. I had some trouble during the winter with the landlord on my practice. They were renovating the house, the building, and it turned out that I, with very short notice, had to leave and find another place because they hadn't considered how the pipes were going there. And in all the contact I had with him, he was very mean, quick and nasty. And I thought, oh, he talked very quickly, and I had hardly time to think what he was saying, and I felt hurt. And I sort of didn't want to, I felt, oh, maybe I should leave and give notice. You say that when you want to leave a place. Hand in a notice. When this had happened, it was sort of gnawing in me. And I remember I was working in the garden the weekend, dragging some branches along, and I found myself thinking that I must deal with this somehow. He ought to say he's sorry. One should not behave that way. And I wanted him to say it, to say that he was sorry to me. And as I was dragging these branches, somebody came across me. That was not what Jesus said. He didn't ask his persecutors to say that they were sorry for putting him on a cross. oh, of course it's I who's going to say I'm sorry. I have to forgive him. Well, it was still painful. It was a long process. And I sort of continued dragging these branches and sort of, all right, I have to forgive him. How am I going to do this? And, well, I started praying for help for this, and I started, and people were saying, well, you must put, because he was pushing me, and I was being very helpful, but in a submissive way, because I was afraid of him, of course. And they said, you have to put your limits and boundaries, people were telling me. And yes, but as soon as I thought of these boundaries I was going to put up, I felt afraid, and that he was a beast, so to say. So I had to start practice thinking of him as things going well for him. But maybe he was stressed in his job, and it was difficult for him to think that, oh, he had a good time in his free time, and to see that things worked well for him. And I must admit, it was not always easy. When I was really tired, I found my thoughts sort of slipped into being afraid of him and seeing him as a beast. But I kept on trying, and had some conversations with him that was sort of a little bit better, but then there was a bad one again, and I felt, oh, it hurt, and I felt, oh gosh, I must have been a terrible landlord. And then I decided I need to have a meeting with him, not only an email or telephone. I need to meet up with him. So I asked for that, and he didn't answer, and I asked again, and I had no answer, and I thought, okay. And then eventually I received a mail back that he had gone on holiday. And I thought, okay, maybe that's something good in that. And a few weeks later, I received an email, yes, we can meet on so-and-so. Okay, cool. And I started praying more. And this was just before I went to Klint. And eventually I met up with him, and he came there in his silver BMW cabriolet, sunburnt, and sunglasses on. And I felt my heart beat a little, wondering how is this, because I was going to have to be difficult. I was going to ask for several things that he had not seen to. And we had a lovely meeting. He sat down in my practice and asked what I worked with. Stress management. And it turned out to be a lovely meeting, and he was quite generous. And I was very happy. But I have some things left to sort out with him when I go back. we're not quite ready yet. But the cycle has moved a little bit at least. Yeah. Now let's look at what modern science says about stress. And this is a quick historic overview where we can see it in 1932 already. The fight and flight reaction was mapped out. One found out, Mr. Cannon there found out what actually happens in our body, what hormones are active, and what happens when we become really fearful or angry. And that is, of course, the instinct of self-preservation that one could map out then. And the acute stress. In the 50s, a scientist called Sey, he he continued this research and found this concept, or invented this concept, general adaptive syndrome, to describe what happens in us, not only in the alarm stage, but also when stress goes on, continues. How do our bodies react then? What do the instinct of self-preservation do to us if it's there sort of as a constant but not so apparent pressure in us? That's the phase he called resistance. And he also found that if that goes on for too long a period, then the organs in us give way or collapse, and we have exhaustion. and that we know about and see a lot of around us today, with people in burnout or chronic fatigue.